Have we started?
Yeah.
Bravo. Very good. What I said in the week after September 11th was in my column in The Nation in New York, where I said what we saw in downtown New York and in Washington last week was fascism with an Islamic face. And you know the history of this observation, perhaps. Socialism with a human face, Susan Sontag re-quoting Dubček about Poland and saying communism with a fascist face, or fascism with a human face. Anyway, it is as much as to say fascism, but I prefer the nuance. Now the word Islamofascism is used a little lightly, I think, but there are things in common, should I say what they are. A fanatical idea of mass mobilization, a cult of the leader, a cult of death, fortunately in some ways because it's self-destructive. It's just also true of fascism. It's irrational, in other words, as well as extremely violent. And a cult of worship of violence, for instance. Of course, without even mentioning it, a fanatical hatred of the Jewish people, and an attempt at the impossible, at the recreation of a lost, glorious past. In this case, the Caliphate. Well, these parallels are good enough, I think, to say that it's not vulgar to draw them.
I actually just had one small question, which is, Christopher, how are you feeling?
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for asking. Well, I'm dying, but so are you. Is it not the case that the spread of Christianity, about which you spoke so warmly and affectingly in your opening remarks, attributing it to the innate truth of the Bible story, was spread by that means, or because the Emperor Constantine decided to make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire? Which, in your view, contributed more to the spread of the faith?
The Holy Spirit.
I rest my case.
You say in your book, God is Not Great, that you think that Jesus Christ did not even exist. You consider seriously the possibility that he was a fictional character. And I'd like to ask you, by what standard of scholarship do you do this? For example, for Socrates, and I think that there's probably no sane philosopher or historian of philosophy who doubts that Socrates existed. We have only two sources really for Socrates, both admiring disciples, Plato and Xenophon, and they give very different portraits of Socrates. So my question is, if Socrates existed by accepted canons of historical scholarship, on what basis do you deny the historicity, forget the divinity, just the historicity of Christ?
Well, you only had to turn another page and to see that I say that there's no proof of the existence of Socrates either. Oh, I'm so sorry. Dinesh,
what about Alexander the Great? Did he exist?
You only have to turn another page to see my say in my discussion of Athenian philosophy that there's no proof of the existence of Socrates either. I make the point almost as you do. I say it's with the exception of two people who were admirers, we can't be certain that he existed at all, but it doesn't make any difference.
Christopher,
because the Socratic, I can revere the Socratic method without having any need at all to deify or put on a pedestal, make superhuman the person who invented it.
No, the point I'm making is...
I'm sorry, you've just dug a pit, not the first time this evening, you've just dug a pit for yourself with your own hands.
Do you believe that God, if he's provided everything for you, has rights on your life?
No.
Because?
Why should he? What gives him this right?
Because he owns you. He's created everything for you. He's kept you alive.
I don't want to be owned, and I don't recognize anyone's right to own me.
So ownership is a bad thing?
Of people, yes.
Oh, okay.
It's been widely considered. I mean, I know the Bible does call for slavery, as it calls for genocide, but that doesn't make it right.
Never like to miss out a chance to congratulate someone on being humorous, if only unintentionally. It's very touching for Tony to say that he recently went to a meeting that bridged a religious divide in Northern Ireland. Well, where does the religious divide come from? When Voltaire was dying, a priest came and said, "You should renounce the devil," and he said, "This is no time to be making enemies." But it's a religious falsification that people like myself scream for a priest. At the end, David Hume very famously didn't and was witnessed by James Boswell not doing so. Most of us go to our ends with dignity. If we don't, and if it is the wish for fear or comfort, then both of these things are equally delusory, as religion is itself.
Hi. First of all, I just want to say I'm writing a book, and it's called An Atheist Defends Religion, Why Religion Succeeds and Atheism Fails. So I am an atheist, but I defend religion. And my...
Really splitting the difference here, huh?
Yeah. I know. I just lost it. I'm sorry. Well, my question is to Christopher is how you can justify wanting to take something away from people from 95 that gives meaning to 95% of the American people and replace it with something that gives meaning to just 5% of the American people.
Well. What an incredibly stupid question. First, I've said repeatedly that this stuff cannot be taken away from people. It is their favorite toy, and it will remain so. As Freud said in The Future of an Illusion, it will remain that way as long as we're afraid of death and have no problem, which is, I think, likely to be quite a long time. Second, I hope I've made it clear that I'm perfectly happy for people to have these toys and to play with them at home and hug them to themselves and so on and share them with other people who come around and play with the toys. So that's absolutely fine. They are not to make me play with these toys. Okay? I will not play with the toys. Don't bring the toys to my house. Don't say my children must play with these toys. Don't say my toys might be a condom. Here we go again. Are not allowed by their toys. I'm not going to have any of that. Enough with clerical and religious bullying and intimidation. Is that finally clear? Have I got that across? Thank you.
You've made the worst concession already. You've already said you're a slave. So,
well, absolutely.
After that, mere obedience to orders is a small offense.
I readily admit that I'm a slave. I'm a slave of the Lord Jesus Christ.
I'm glad of your chains.
Yeah, well...
it's absolutely fine for you, but you must leave me out of it. I don't want to be told that I have to obey these laws too, or that my children have to be taught this in school, or that laws have to be written to gratify the bizarre beliefs of a cult like yours.
Well, but...
That's the thing I would need you to understand. You're quite
Sure.
happy to believe this. Why can't you keep it to yourself?
Why can't you keep your atheism to yourself?
Because the religious won't allow me to. Because every time I open the paper, there's another instance of theocratic encroachment on free society, which I won't put up with which I will not put.
Christopher, I've got to call you down on referring to circumcision as genital mutilation. My son cried more at his first haircut than he did at his bris. And statistically...
You weren't doing it right then.
Statistically, the only long-term effect that it seems to have on people is it increases their chances of winning a Nobel Prize.
I can't find the compulsory mutilation of the genitals of children a subject for humor in that way, or flippancy in that way. Maimonides says very plainly that it's designed to repress sexual pleasure, to deprive us, a male child as far as possible of the opportunity of that. The full excision, not just the snip or the full mandatory covenant is fantastically painful, leads to trauma, leads to the dulling of the sexual relationship, and can be in itself life-threatening at that moment. We have the records, I can show them to you, of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in the United States, boy babies who've died or had life-threatening infections as a result of this disgusting practice. That a person as humane as yourself can sit here and think of that as a fit subject for humor shows what I mean. Religion makes morally normal people say and do disgusting and wicked things, and you've just proved my point for me. Shame on you for saying what you just said. Shame on you for saying it about your own son, my God.
Let's move on.
Yes, let's. What next? Cutting the labia of little girls. At least Judaism doesn't do that.
This is a question.
What if a Muslim was to say to you just now, my little girl cried more at her first haircut than when I cut off her clitoris? What would you think of me if I was to say such a disgusting thing?
Well,
Remember, we are not talking about detail here. We're talking about whether religion makes people behave better or not. Ask yourself if you really wish it was true that there was a celestial dictatorship that watched over you from the moment you were born, actually the moment you were conceived, all through life, night and day, knew your thoughts, waking and sleeping, could in fact convict you of thought crime. The absolute definition of a dictatorship can convict you for what you think, or what you privately want, what you're talking about to yourself, that monitors you like this, under permanent surveillance, control, and supervision, and doesn't even let go of you when you're dead, because that's when the real fun begins. Now, my question is this. Who wishes that that were true? Who wants to lead the life of a serf in a celestial North Korea? And I suppose I should add that they don't threaten to follow you after you're dead. You can leave North Korea. You can get out of their hell and their paradise by dying. Out of the Christian and Muslim one, you cannot. Now let's take a case of someone who's been dealt a bad hand. What about Fräulein Freisel in Austria, whose father, unwilling to get out of the way, kept her in a dungeon where she didn't see daylight for 24 years and came down most nights to rape and to sodomize her, often in front of the children who were the victims of the previous attacks and offenses. And it's only purely by accident that Herr Freisel is now in custody. And it's a shame that he's 76, because his life imprisonment isn't going to feel enough like that to him. I want you to just take a moment, since we're so interested in the downtrodden and the helpless. Imagine how she must have begged him. Imagine how she must have pleaded. Imagine for how long. Imagine how she must have prayed every day, how she must have beseeched heaven. Imagine, for 24 years, and no answer at all. Nothing. Imagine how those children must have felt. Imagine what they felt when they saw one of their number, the dead twin, being born away from neglect on top of everything else. Now, you say that's all right that she went through that, because she'll get a better deal in another life. I have to ask you if you can be morally or ethically serious and postulate such a question. No, that had to happen, and heaven did watch it with indifference, because it knows that score will later on be settled. So it was well worth her going through it. She'll have a better time next time. I don't see how you can look anyone in the face, or live with yourself, and say anything so hideously, wickedly immoral as that, or even imply it. There, that's my answer.
Well, I will say just for myself, and then I'll throw it open to the panel, that I have never heard a Christian say anything remotely similar to that. That is a caricature. And
excuse me, you just said you'll get a better body having suffered with this one. I hate to put it like this, but it's your own phrasing. She's going to get what in exchange for 24 years of dungeonhood, rape, sodomy, and incest that, according to you, heaven watched? Because that was part of heaven's plan too. How are you one? I have to ask you this. How do you know that? What do you know that I don't, that allows you to say that heaven does this? Second, how can you possibly say it's moral?
Let's look at another example. There's a place called the Oasis here in Sydney. It's a shelter for young homeless people. At the heart and soul of this place is a Salvation Army captain called Paul Moulds and his wife. Now, they're non-judgmental as far as I can see. They don't seem to be pushing their religion. Essentially, they practice their faith by helping others. So can that be poisonous?
No, but in what sense in that case is it religious? Again, you're saying these people are so nice they're hardly religious at all. To tell a child, you go to this church, which means you'll go to heaven, but your little playmates don't go to that church, and therefore will go to hell, seems to me to be an unpleasant thing to be saying. But
yes, that is.
Maybe I'm in a minority then.
That could be an unpleasant thing, but how do you...
Actually, an evil thing.
Let's call it evil, Christopher.
Something that only a religious person would dream of saying.
Let's call it evil. Where does evil come from?
Religion.
I'm trying to distill some of my thoughts because you evoked an enormous amount of reactions within me. I consider myself a traditional Jew, and I agree with everything that you have said. I also disagree with the appellations of this is a man of faith and this is not a man of faith. I mean, I think that is very unfair and absolutely very wrong to say. I don't think that Judaism quite fits into your category of religion with a capital R, because it offers you so many different parts of being Jewish. You can be an absolute atheist and be part of Judaism. You could be Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, humanist, who does not want to even, I will in a moment, have the concept of God, and also be anything that you care to be, and Judaism accepts you. If some ultra-Orthodox rabbis issue statements that are not in consonance with what you have just said, then we don't have to agree with him, and we're still Jews. So this is my question.
Yeah.
When, thank you, when Christian religionists and evangelicals say to me, but you don't understand, we have a mission for you. You need to be saved. You must accept Jesus Christ or you cannot be saved. What shall I answer them?
God, well, I mean, that's the second bit of the question is very easy to answer. I mean, tell her to fuck off.
So what if God actually exists, sir? Would he not have been good to you?
No. He wouldn't. Because if that were true, it would mean that I had an eternal supervising parent who would never die and let me get on with my life, never let me grow up, would keep me under surveillance.
But you have, sir.
And supervision every minute of my life.
But you have.
Constantly asked me to be thanking and praising him.
Yeah.
I think it would
that
be
wasn't part
like,
of the
it would be
scenario.
like living in North Korea. I think it would be a horrible outcome.
Well, not sure that God is Kim Jong-il, but what if what I said is true?
Well, ask Kim Jong-il, he has a different opinion.
Now, I'm sorry, though, to have to begin by disagreeing with His Grace. If you're going to be a serious grown-up person and appear to defend the Catholic Church in public in front of an educated and literate audience, you simply have to start by making a great number of heartfelt apologies and requests for contrition and forgiveness. His Holiness on that occasion, it was March the 12th, 2000, if you wish to look it up, begged forgiveness for, among some other things, the Crusades, the Inquisition, the persecution of the Jewish people, injustice towards women, that's half the human race right there, and the forced conversion of indigenous peoples, especially in South America. And that followed a whole series of preceding apologies, or apologies, I would say, of a kind, made by the late Pope John Paul, who, it troubles me not at all to say, was a very impressive and serious human being. It followed no less than 94, count them, public recognitions on his part of appalling crime and error and cruelty and stupidity and offences to the free intelligence, ranging from, I shall be summary, like Bishop Marini, the African slave trade, apologized for in 1995, the admission that Galileo was right about the relationship between the sun and the earth and other orbs, which came in 1992, one might add. No, I won't say, it's too easy to say better late than never. Here, I said it. To violence and torture, legalized torture. Torture was legalized and institutionalized by the Roman pontiff during the Counter-Reformation. That came in 1995. And for silence during Hitler's final solution, or Shoah, as well as, in 1999, coming in just under the Millennium Jubilee wire, an apology for the burning alive in the main square of Prague of the great Czech Protestant Jan Hus. But remember, this is from a church that, on the whole, cannot err. We still await a more direct admission. For example, I would give some suggestions of my own while we're at it. I would like them to take back the Concordat made with Adolf Hitler, the first treaty he ever signed, giving the Church a monopoly over education in Germany in exchange for the dissolution of the Catholic Centre Party to give the Nazi Party a clear run. I'd have apologized for the Lateran Pact with Mussolini, myself, also the first treaty ever signed by that fascist dictator. I would also think I'd want to reconsider the fact that Father Tiso, head of the Nazi puppet state in Slovakia, was a priest in holy orders, that the Croatian fascist puppet state, the Ustaša state of Ante Pavelic, was also operating under full clerical protection and disguise, as was the regime of General Franco and the dictator Antonio Salazar. And I really think I would beg forgiveness for this. I don't think the German church should have asked Hitler's birthday to be celebrated from the pulpit every year until he died. These are very serious matters, and they're not to be laughed off by references to the occasional work of Catholic charities. But I draw your attention not just to the apologies, ladies and gentlemen, but to the evasive and euphemistic form that they take. Joseph Ratzinger, the current Pope, considered by some, by Catholics, to be the Vicar of Christ on earth, says of Indians, of the Indians who were massacred in the course of conversion in Brazil, after the apology had been made to them, he said, nonetheless, it must be remembered that before we came to convert them, they were silently awaiting the arrival of the church. I don't think that's a very genuine kind of apology to you. In his comment, one of the few he's made, on the institutionalization of rape and torture and maltreatment of children in Catholic institutions, he has said, it's a very severe crisis which involves us, he said, in the following: in the need for applying to these victims the most loving pastoral care. Well, I'm sorry. They've already had that. And to say that this is the responsibility laid upon you by the horrific admission that you've already had to make is not accepting responsibility in any adult sense. I think that there will be an apology for what happened in Rwanda, the most Catholic country in Africa, one of the most Catholic countries in the world, where priests and nuns and bishops are on trial for inciting from their pulpits and on the church's radio stations and newspapers the massacre of their brothers and sisters. And the papacy was silent on this appalling occasion. And everyone in Rwanda knows it. And there hasn't yet been a properly written apology for that disgrace. Staying in Africa, I think it will one day be admitted with shame that it might have been in error to say that AIDS is bad as a disease, very bad, but not quite as bad as condoms are bad, or not as immoral in the same way. I say it in the presence of His grace, and I say it to His face. The preachings of His church are responsible for the death and suffering and misery of millions of His brother and sister Africans, and He should apologize for it. He should show some shame. Fourth, for condemning my friend Stephen Fry for his nature, for saying you couldn't be a member of our church. You're born in sin. There's a revolting piece of casuistry that's sometimes offered on this point. Yeah, we hate the sin only. We love the sinner. Stephen is, I'm sorry to say, not quite like other girls. It's his nature. Actually, he is like other girls in that he's, when I last checked, absolutely boy mad. He's not being condemned for what he does, he's being condemned for what he is. You're a child made in the image of God. Oh, no, you're not. You're a faggot. And you can't join your church and you can't go to heaven. This is disgraceful. It's inhuman. It's obscene. And it comes from a clutch of hysterical, sinister virgins who've already betrayed their charge in the children of their own church. For shame! For shame!
Well, I want to make it clear in our closing moments here, Christopher. I don't consider you an enemy. I don't consider you...
But I'm very sorry to hear that.
Well, I know, because you want me to be your enemy.
Excuse me, you are my enemy.
Well, but you're not my enemy.
How you can figure that?
No, because I don't feel a need to have to silence Christopher Hitchens.
Well, you don't have a chance of doing that. I don't mean that at all, but I mean your preachments are evil and they're a direct threat to the survival of civilization. So if you don't consider me an enemy, you don't know an enemy when you see or hear one.
We have everything to fear, including fear itself, and the bad news hasn't yet hit, I don't think.
I think you may be right.
We're all into a losing struggle. No one has ever beaten these odds. I've looked up ahead, or if you prefer, down the road. I know what's coming. I know no one beats these odds. And it's a matter of getting used to that and growing up and realizing that you're expelled from your mother's uterus as if shot from a cannon towards a barn door studded with old nail files and rusty hooks. It's a matter of how you use up the intervening time in an intelligent and ironic way and try not to do anything ghastly to your fellow creatures.